Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and our salvation. Amen. If I fade in and out, it's me. I can tell you it's not it's my electrical system, okay? Let me ask you a question. Any drivers in here? Anybody likes to drive? Good. As a driver, sit on the passenger side. Well, not as a driver. Excuse me, that didn't sound right, did it? If you're sitting on the passenger side and driving. But have you ever been a driver and then ridden on the passenger side? The world looks different over there, doesn't it? When we were visiting our friends a week or so ago, he and I would share driving. We'd sometimes ride in their car, and they would ride in our car. And I was riding in their car. I noticed as the passenger up front, the world looks different up there. And even occasionally with my wife, Carol will drive, and I will sit on the passenger side. And you see things that you've never seen before. Even as a driver, you're supposed to know everything that's going on, in front of you, on the side of you, behind you. You're out looking, and I was learned in a defensive driving course that when you're looking out this way, you're supposed to be looking out that way, and you'll also be in your mind to be saying, if you have a problem, which way would you get off the road, where would you go, and all the rest of that stuff. But sitting over in the passenger side, it's a little different world over there. You begin to see things somewhat differently. I'll tell you that story because that's what happened with today's gospel reading. This gospel reading about Jesus and Peter and Jesus walking on the water and the ghost and being called out there. Many times I have to admit readily in my own life that the many times I have preached on this text, I would always blame Peter because he took his eyes off of Jesus and he began to sink. And I would guarantee you there are a lot of preachers that preach that text that way. But I don't see it that way. Maybe it's because I've been out of the parish. Maybe it's because I have more time on my hands. Maybe the Spirit is putting me in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. I'd like to put this text into context, maybe so you could begin to see what I have seen in this text this time. Does anybody know what happened exactly right before this whole incident? Yes. Feeding of the 5,000 plus. Wow, can you imagine that? The disciples didn't want anything to do with those 5,000. What did they want to do? They wanted to send them off to the store. Go get them, find themselves. But Jesus said, no, I'm going to take care of it. And he did, didn't he? 5,000 plus, a few fish and a few loaves of bread. And then after it was all over, remember what the disciples had to do? They had to go through there and collect everything, didn't they? Now, can you imagine 5,000 plus people, and then they had to go out and clean up after them? Most of you don't like cleaning up after a few people. So the disciples were tired. Even though they had experienced this great moment in their life, they were exhausted. This was not the kind of thing they thought they should be doing, first of all. And now when Jesus did this miracle before them, they saw something happen which they could not believe with their eyes. So I believe they were physically exhausted, and I also believe they were mentally exhausted, trying to comprehend what they had just experienced. And then Jesus must have been exhausted too, because Jesus follows a normal pattern here, that when something like this happens in his life, after it's over, he decides to go off by himself and pray. And I think some of us can understand that. If you've ever had some kind of program you put on, or something that has happened, some big birthday celebration, some kind of celebration, when it's all over, you too are exhausted. And some of us like to just find a place off to ourselves to be quiet. But Jesus decides that not only is he going off by himself, he says to the disciples, you take the boat, go to the other side, and I'll meet you there. Now, I'm not sure if they had ever figured out how Jesus was going to get to the other side, but they obeyed him. And they got into the boat. Anybody here been to Israel? Were you on this lake? Uh-huh. It's only 3.5 miles across, folks. It's not huge. But the wind currents and the turbulence on the lake is so unpredictable that it doesn't take much time suddenly for a storm to come up. In fact, the experience I had out there was when I was with a pastoral conference. We had one of our pastoral conferences from the southeastern district. We were fortunate enough to go to Israel. And they stopped the boat in the middle of the lake. And I got to read this text. But I can just imagine what it must have been like to be in the dark, in the middle of a lake, with the waves and the wind coming. Now the waves and the wind are hitting the boat. The disciples are normal fishermen, but they're also, what did I say to you? They are exhausted. They are exhausted physically. They are exhausted mentally. This whole thing, it seems as though they've been on a mountain high, and now suddenly it's all crashed around them. Anybody here ever been on one of those days where everything just seemed like everything was just going your way? Life was just, I know, I'm going to date myself, hunky-dory. And then suddenly, it's as though the bottom falls out. It's as though everything just seems to fall apart. Or if you've had one of those things where you planned everything out and you're all set and it all is going to work together and it's all focused and we're really ready to go and I'm so excited about it, and the next day I come into the office or I go someplace and guess what? Somebody changed something. Just like that. So, begin to see this picture. Now the disciples are a distance out into the water, but I also want to say to you in Matthew, this is the second incident on the water. This is chapter 14. Back in chapter 8, Jesus is on the boat with them and he's, anybody know? Asleep. And a storm comes up, and they all get all excited. And he talks about them having little faith. And then he calms the sea. And it's all over with. Notice something different this time? First of all, it seems as though he's not with them. Notice my careful words. It seems as though he's not with them. And they're caught into this storm. They're caught into these moments of life. And suddenly, Jesus comes walking to them on the water. Now, come on. No wonder they thought it was a ghost. But remember, I said to you, they're exhausted. They're exhausted physically. They're exhausted mentally. And when they begin to see things, anybody ever had that experience? Where you're so totally exhausted, physically, mentally, suddenly you begin to see things, you're not sure what you're seeing, double vision, whatever happens, maybe you're exhausted, maybe you haven't had enough water or whatever, and you begin to have that kind of moment in life. But I think what's interesting is what happens next. If you listen carefully to the text, Jesus doesn't stop the storm right away. He knows their fear. He knows the boats are rocking. He knows they're exhausted. He knows they're fearful, but he doesn't stop the storm immediately. Peter, my friend Peter. Peter, who reflects to me every one of us. Peter's out there and Lord. But Peter recognizes Jesus is out there. He's not afraid of the ghost. And what does he say? Isn't it interesting in the text? I want you to think about this. If you had been Peter and you'd been them on that boat and this whole storm was going on and everything was happening and you saw Jesus walking to you on the water and you remember the experience of Matthew chapter 8, what would your first words to Jesus be? Stop the storm. Up the storm. But he doesn't, does he? In fact, Peter sees Jesus out there. He sees him walking on the water, and he says, Lord, I join you. About that? You begin to see what I'm beginning to see in this text? Jesus doesn't immediately stop the storm. Jesus doesn't immediately stop everything. Jesus doesn't say, it's all over with, it'll be okay. No. Jesus appears there on the water with his disciples in their midst, in their struggles, in their times of fear, in their exhaustion. They're not sure, but they know something is there. They know his presence is there. Peter recognizes it. And what does Peter immediately say? Stop it? No. I know you're there. Let me join you. So how long have we been in this pandemic? Too long. I know that's the answer I'm going to get for most people. And it's really upset a lot of things, hasn't it? It's changed a lot of things. And for some of us, the storm is everywhere we turn. We can't do things the way we're used to doing them. We've got live streaming. We've got you all sitting in special spots in church. You're all wearing masks. Life has changed. And if Jesus was with us, what do we want to say to him? Stop it? But you see, I see today's text telling us something else. I see today's text reminding us that he's with us in all these times. And that it's not going to be that he wants to say, and he could, stop it. But maybe we need to recognize through these times his presence with us. Maybe we need to join Peter and say, hey, Lord, can I come with you? Can I join you? Can I connect to you? I know what you've done. I know your promises to me. Your promise is you will never leave me, nor will you forsake me. So let me walk with you through the storm. Too often, we'd like to go back to the other text, and we'd like to say, get it over with. Knock it out. Wipe it. Stop the storm. But you see, I see Jesus connecting with Peter and the disciples in a way for us to understand that no matter how bad the waves get, no matter how tough life gets, no matter how much we struggle, no matter how much water comes into that boat, no matter how much happens to us, he's there. And maybe we need to learn to say, let me join you. That's where I find myself. That's where I begin to see this text speaking to us today. No, Peter didn't take his eyes off of Jesus. Peter connected with Jesus. And yeah, when things got tough, Jesus reached out his arm and he saved him. As he'll save every single one of us. As you heard in the text, in Romans text today, all who believed are saved. And somewhere in the storms and somewhere in that moment, somewhere in life, it will cease to be. I'm not sure if those disciples really totally understood what was about to happen. I don't think Peter knew that as soon as Jesus reached his arm out to him back into the boat, everything was going to be smooth again. But hear the confession of faith. Truly, you are the Son of God. When we can begin to experience over and over again that in the storms of life, that in the struggles we have, that sometimes when we're up here and then we're down here, when sometimes everything seems to be falling in place and then it simply seems to all fall apart, where's Jesus? He's there. Let me share something with you this morning. Carol and I have been doing this little devotion. It's called Jesus Calling for Teens. No comments. And this morning's was very interesting. Kind of fits the text for today. Listen carefully. When you are afraid, I want to be the center of your life. When you focus on me, my peace chases your fears and worries away. I know everyone is afraid sometimes. I'm not saying you will never be afraid. What I am saying is that you never have to face your fears alone. I am always with you, and my strength is always there for you. I will never leave you. But fear is a sneaky thing. Just when you think you've gotten it out of your life, it will creep up behind and whisper in your ear, you're all alone. But remember my words. I'm always with you. Thank me for my presence and trust me. This will protect you from fear. Spend time in the light of my love while I bless you with my peace. I know those disciples experienced that. And there would be more in their lives yet to challenge them. And I know you and I, we're not done with this pandemic, and we're not done with lots of other things that are happening in life. But I know he's with us. He reaches out his hand. Hold on to it. That's his promise of love for you and for me, today and always. And all God's people say, and forever.